Oh, hello. I didn't see you there. I was just reading comic books. Now you might think, a grown man reading comic books? How disgusting! Doesn't he have a life? And two things. One, no. And two, I don't think you're right about comic books. I think sometimes comic books get a bad rap for being something for children or just a waste of time. You know, kids should learn how to read real books like documentaries and encyclopedias. Now, probably less so than in the past, but I think comic books actually tell us something very interesting about us. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sci-Fi Academia YouTube channel. My name is Cademan David, and today I want to have a conversation about comic books. This is an unscripted video, so do apologize if it's a little bit less polished than maybe you want, but I like to ramble. So, that's what I'm doing here. All that being said, our story is gonna start pre-World War II. Anti-Semitism is big at this time. It's funny how things come full circle. Anyway, that's an entirely different topic for an entirely different video, probably made by someone who is not me. So, anyway, it's hard for Jewish people to get jobs. So, they get a lot of jobs in writing for pulp magazines. Pulp being the cheap paper that comic books are written on. So basically, a lot of Jewish people just end up writing for these cheap magazines. It's a lot of comic books, it's stuff like that. Anyway, two of these two young Jewish lads would go on to become the creators of Superman, whose names I can't remember off the top of my head. Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. Schuster? Cut that out. Editing me, cut that part out. Get out of here. Get out of here. We don't like it. It's gone. You'll never see it, audience. Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster would go on to become the creators of Superman. Superman being a very interesting name because, as probably a lot of you know, though some of you might not, the name Superman comes from the Übermensch. The Übermensch was sort of a philosophical ideal of German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Über being German for super, and Mensch being German for man. So put together you get the Übermensch, which translates in English to Superman. Bum ba bum. Bum ba bum. Anyway, the idea of the Superman being just sort of this philosophical idea of what perhaps a man should look like the idea of the better person, the superior person. The Übermensch, of course, would be adopted into the Nazi philosophy, which I think is in part why Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster wanted to use the name Superman. I think they thought maybe we can, take this philosophy that's leading a lot of people to hate us, and we can sort of use it to make something a little bit better. And what was that something that was a little bit better? It was the character that we know today as Superman. What if someone was powerful and strong, but stood up for the little guy? Stood up for the Jewish people who couldn't get a job. Now, we fast forward roughly 3 years, and another character is invented. Captain America! Who comes to the stands bravely punching Hitler in his stupid face. Now, here's the thing that's interesting about that. Shout out to NerdSync, who has a video about this, which I would highly recommend checking out. He is much more knowledgeable towards comic books than I am. Nonetheless, it's sort of a lesser known fact that when Captain America was printed on the front page, knocking Hitler in the jaw, that was prior to America's involvement in World War II. So I want you to think about this. A character dressed up like the American flag punching the leader of another country that is the big part of a conflict America wasn't involved in. I think part of the reason for this was because Captain America was created by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby, which, guess what? We're both Jewish. So probably these two men used Captain America as a way to make a statement. America, the powerful nation that it is, should be fighting for us, should be fighting for the little guys. This is just so interesting because on the other side of World War II now, it's pretty rare to find people who might be like, oh, America shouldn't have been involved in the war, right? Like we sort of lose touch on the controversy behind that Captain America issue. Again, NerdSync did a whole video you can check out. It's mostly really good. I mostly like that video, though NerdSync obviously disagrees politically with me on a lot of things, still makes good videos. So all of that coming together, the creation of Captain America, the creation of Superman, what we have is this sort of superhero invention, right? Not that there wasn't superheroes in the pulps before this, but the superheroes I don't think were quite the same prior to the invention of Superman. I think Superman sort of opened a new era of superheroes, and that's sort of the superhero that we know today, whereas prior to Superman there was like the Phantom, there was the Shadow, characters like that, which I would call sort of superhero light characters. I don't know if anyone else would call them that, but it's my video, so I can call them what I want. But I think what this sort of superhero genre really points to, and this is what like modern MCU movies are really missing, is they're missing the philosophy of superheroes. And that philosophy is the Ubermensch, the ideal person, right? And that's someone who is strong, who will fight against injustice, but will also be loving, will also take time to care about all the small people and help them to have better lives. Fight for the weak. If we look in the Bible, we'll find someone who's very similar in philosophy to the superhero ideal. I am talking about Jesus. Now, I don't think it's a pretty well-known fact, I think, at this point, that Superman, in a lot of ways, was meant to be sort of a symbol of the Messiah, or perhaps a metaphor for the Messiah, which, of course, myself, as a Christian, believes Jesus was the Messiah. the creators of Superman wouldn't have believed that. But nonetheless, it's just the mentality of like, what if there was someone who had this power, someone who had this ability to stand up for those most persecuted and fight for them? If you look at Jesus' ministry, that's what he did. He said anyone who causes a child to stumble would be better off if they had a millstone tied around their neck and they were dropped in a lake. Not those exact words. And also, he was very big on criticizing those in power who made other people's lives harder. If you've gone to Sunday school, you probably know a story of Jesus in the tabernacle flipping over tables and making himself a whip, most likely to get the animals out of there that were being sold. Now, a bit of context for this story that is a little bit less talked about, I think, is that the way the temple worked is that there was different portions of the temple and different people were allowed in the different areas. The area where stuff would have been being sold is the area that the Gentiles, the non-Jewish people, that was the only area they were allowed to go to worship Yahweh. So I believe that's why Jesus had such a strong reaction to them being there, right? He saw the troubles of these less fortunate people, and he saw how the place they should be able to go to worship Yahweh was being turned into the supermarket. So, in sort of conclusion to this video, why are we drawn to characters like Superman or Captain America? I think we're drawn to them because we know that we need a savior. We know we need Jesus. Someone who will stand up for us when we can't stand up for ourselves. Someone who will even sacrifice their life so that we can live on. But not someone who is like a hippie, someone who's all about love all the time. We want someone who can fight for justice and fight for us. So, what do you think? Do you think that, the sort of Superman and Captain America sort of point to Jesus? Do you think that they're completely unrelated? I don't know. I would like to hear your thoughts, because this is just sort of something I've been thinking about a lot on my own, and I decided to finally risk making a video on it. And I say risk because even now I'm afraid that, I said something a little bit wrong that's, maybe not as true as I think it is. But, take everything I say with a grain of salt, do your own research. I just think this kind of thing is really interesting. I love superheroes, and I think they play a big part in sort of the role of everything. And I think they actually tell an important, valuable story about humanity itself. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye!